Hey students, I hope you're doing well. This is Mr. Crane here. I'm not sure what's going on. Everything's a little fuzzy, but we'll just get through it. We'll just power through. Along with this video, I will send you resources that I've gathered on each topic that you guys asked for help on. And again, if you didn't get your topic in this week, try again next week. I try to rotate which students have topics selected, although some are always the first ones in there. So reply early on those emails for survey topics, and I'll try to get those in there and help you guys out and get you some extra credit. I'm going to go real fast today because I found that the resources are probably going to help you more than me just blabbing on and on and on and making everybody hear every topic when they might not need to do that. So I'm just going to kind of briefly give you a little information on each topic if I know something about it. And then I'll include resources so you can dig more deep into those, and it'll really help you, especially if you're writing a paper or have a project or quiz coming up, okay? All right, so the first one, Jamie asked about the reforms of Khrushchev and Gorbachev. And so those are very interesting. You're basically looking at the evolution of the communist government of the Soviet Union. And at first, it was really kind of, we'll say, hardcore communist in that they thought they could have the government control the entire economy and all businesses, what they produce, what prices they set things at, and even run a lot of the businesses. And then over time, usually what a communist government does is realize that if you continue to do that, people are going to starve to death and not have many products to choose from and become very unhappy and maybe even revolt. So they usually start allowing more economic freedom like China has today, where people can now own businesses to an extent, although they're still at the mercy of the government on a lot of aspects of that. Same thing in the Soviet Union. They started allowing a little bit of business ownership, mainly by government officials, but uh, just they just allow a little more freedom in terms of setting prices and things like that. So again, I'll send you a lot of details, and I won't bore you with that. But that's generally what happens in a communist government when they realize that if they keep treating people the way they do at first, they might have a revolt on their hands, and so they start relaxing the economy a little bit, or the control of the economy by the government a little bit. Somebody asked about Lincoln. Liam did asked about Abraham Lincoln. Um, Man, we could talk about that for an hour or two. I'm not going to do that. I will just say that if you read the speeches of Lincoln, there's a book that contains all of them. They're fascinating. And a lot of people love to hate Lincoln. A lot of people love Lincoln. Some think he's the greatest president ever, some not so much. He gets criticized for a couple of things and maybe unfairly as well. So I'll just talk about those because I find those interesting and unique to Lincoln. Number one is he said that when the South broke away in terms of the Civil War, that the Constitution did not apply anymore. And so he did a lot of things that would be considered tyrannical or unconstitutional and way outside of his power. And he did. He locked people up for talking out against the government. He locked people up for just being suspiciously maybe involved with the southern states without even much evidence. And a lot of people rotted in jail for years without a fair trial, like is stated in our Constitution. And that's because Lincoln said, well, when this Civil War happened, that's not covered in the Constitution, and so it no longer applies, and so rights don't apply. And he had to do what he had to do to get the war over and bring the country back as whole. So he was one of the first ones to say it's an emergency. It's an emergency. We got to get this bill passed and this money here and this money there. And then every president after Lincoln pretty much did the same thing. They know now that to get us to um, support whatever they're doing in the government, they just say it's an emergency, and then they'll get away with it, and they can do a lot of things that they're usually not supposed to do. And so FDR was a big example of that. all the way up to Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and others have all said, it's an emergency, and we got to get this done now. That goes back to the playbook of Lincoln. I will say I cut him slack personally. I don't think he's horrible for doing those things because it was a civil war and you really don't have a social contract in place as the founders talked about at that point. Um, so yeah. The other thing is on slavery. Now this is going to sound terrible, but for this time period, Lincoln was one of the good guys for sure on slavery. Back then, a lot of Southerners would say that black people, African Americans, were not fully human, and so it's okay to treat them differently, and they weren't as intelligent as other people. Um, and you hear a lot of those arguments with things today, like the abortion argument, that it's not really a human, and so it's okay to do X to this thing. And that's kind of what they would argue back then. Now, Lincoln stated that he kind of agreed with that. He said in one of his speeches that African Americans probably weren't as smart as other groups of people, but he still said they deserve equal rights, even if they're not. And so they should be treated equally under the law. And this was where he was way ahead for his time, and especially compared to Southern politicians. And so a lot of people say he was racist, and maybe he was a little bit in that way, but he still said that those people deserved equal rights and equal treatment by the law, which was way different from most of the pro slavery people of the time. Also, Lincoln is known for changing his speeches to different groups of people, so he would say a little bit different thing to a little bit different audience, and he was a very good politician in that way. Okay, so I'm not trying to make you hate Lincoln or like Lincoln or none of the above. I'm just giving you the truth here, okay? But for that time period, and you have to be careful judging people from 150, 200 years ago by our standards today, because the world was a different place, okay? Um, and so be careful with that. Tanvi asked about World War One. I'm, I mean, there's a million ways we could go on that. I'm just looking to see if anybody else wanted to know anything about World War One. Also about World War One leaders. And I'll send you resources on that because that would take a while. But yeah, one thing on World War One, one of the big takeaways in history books about it is why did the whole world get involved and go nuts after the assassination of Duke Ferdinand? And it was because they had secret alliances ahead of time, and we had more advanced weapons at the time, but still used old school tactics, so to speak. So in this war, we have machine guns, we have explosive devices like really good grenades, we have poison gas, we have airplanes dropping bombs for the first time, we have tanks blowing things up for the first time. And at first, the generals from all these nations thought they could just line up and face each other like they did at more colonial warfare with muskets. And so guys are just getting mowed down. And I think if you look at the total amount of people killed during this war, I want to say it was around like 70 million, which if you think about it, at that time period was a huge percentage of the population of the earth that got killed during this war because of the way they fought it at first. Just terrible, just wrecked whole countries. It took them years to rebuild their population in some of these nations that were involved. Okay, so again, I'll include more resources on that in the email. Let's move on. Javin asked for tips for short writing assignments. And the big one on that is I see a lot of students, you guys are using AI to write your essays. First of all, don't do that because you're not going to learn anything and you're not going to improve as a writer. And AI is only going to go so far on that. It can't learn everything for you the rest of your life. So please don't do that. It just wastes my time and your time because there's all these AI detectors out there. They're going to find it and catch it. And even if it's a small amount, and I'm going to make you rewrite it and use in-text citation and cite your sources, which you should learn to do anyways. So that's the first tip is write your own paper. You can use AI to give you ideas. So if you had a paper or an essay you had to write on World War One, I would ask AI if you're going to do that. Hey, show me the main points of World War One. Why did it happen? How did it end? Things like that. And then write your own paper off the information given you. And that's exactly what you should be doing anyways, really. If you read a book or use an online resource, is go learn the information, take notes on it, and then cite those resources so I know you didn't just rip it off, okay? But more generally, cover the who, what, when, where, and why. Who was involved? What happened? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? When did it happen? Who, what, when, where, why? And so you can give a great kind of outline of it that way, and you don't have to write 20 pages about it, okay? The other thing is make sure you cover everything in the writing prompt. I see a lot of students getting partial credit because they'll cover the first question or the main statement, but then they leave out follow-up statements or questions in the writing prompt. And so you're killing your grade doing that. Make sure you cover everything in the writing prompt. And you should always include details and examples. So if it says what happened in World War One, you wouldn't just say there was a big world war. It's like, well, again, who, what, when, where, why? Who was involved? Why did it happen? What happened? What is a world war? Define it. Otherwise, you're going to get a horrible grade. You're probably going to get an F if you just throw something out there like that. Okay. Give examples. Give details. Okay. Tell what happened. Maybe anything that was unique about it, how it affected the future or other events in history. For instance, the end of World War One probably set up World War Two because the German nation, Germany, was basically punished for the whole thing because they were the main instigators that lost. And Woodrow Wilson of America and some of the other nations, they gave them such a big fine that they had to pay that it put the nation in debt and they couldn't function. And so eventually Hitler comes along and says, forget all that, we're not doing it. And the people loved that because then their economy could get going again and things got better. And so that's one of the things that helped him come to power. And so, sadly, when you try to punish a nation like that, it might come back to bite you later, and it did with World War II. Okay, so that's a very interesting thing you could mention about World War One is how it turned out there. Okay, so Javin, I'll include some more details on writing in general, but if you cover the who, what, when, where, why, use details and examples to back up any claims or statements you make and then tell where you got the information from, you're going to do really well. Whether it's college, whether it's ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, doesn't matter. If you do all of that, you're going to do really well. Okay. Let's see. Next one. Lola asked about microeconomics. That's a huge topic. I'll include resources on that. If you need more specifics or have questions, Lola, just hit me back in the email. Okay. Michaela asked about Spanish rule in the Philippines. Um, that's actually, I've heard some interesting stories about that, but I don't remember a ton about it. But the Philippines is an Asian nation south of, it's some of those little islands south of Japan. And they actually end up becoming Catholic and speaking Spanish because they were settled by the Spanish. And they're one of our huge staging points in World War II as well to help China and combat Japan because they're south of there and they were trying to be a democracy and they were very influenced by the United States as well. Um, so yeah, I think that it might have even become a United States colony for a while. I can't remember. Um, but yeah, interesting times. Spain used to be kind of like Great Britain before Great Britain. They had territories all around the planet, and kind of like they used to say about the British, the sun never set on the British Empire. Spain was like that for a long time. South America, Asia, North America, Africa. Spain had properties everywhere at one time. So yeah, pretty interesting history there for the Philippines. And again, I'll include more information on that. Sid asked about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Yeah, There's been research comes out that says that's come out that said FDR might have known that was coming, but kind of allowed it to happen so that the United States, the general public would finally support going to war with the Axis powers. I'm not saying I know that for sure, but there is some really neat information out there about that. Anyways, it's where Japan bombed Hawaii, and I think they killed 1,200 or 2,000, somewhere between 1,200 and 2,000 of our soldiers at the time. Blew up half of our navy that was parked out there, and led to the United States officially entering World War II. So huge event, and you can still go to Hawaii today and see some of the sunken boats, and there's still oil bubbling up from where they got blown up in the ocean. They're still sitting there. Um, Riley asked about air pollution and the economy. I'll include resources on that, Riley. Remy asked about the biggest nation in the 13th century. I'll include a little bit of information on that, Remy, but that'd be a great question for AI. So if you go to like Chat GPT or something, like it says the Mongol Empire was the biggest nation in the 13th century and the largest contiguous land empire in all of world history. And a lot of that turned into later China and Russia. So pretty interesting stuff there. Um, and then Adeline asked about acoustic, Adeline, sorry, Adeline, asked about some acoustic guitar information. I'll include some of that. And Amber asked about inflation, and I'll include some information on that. That's huge right now. Just remember that the more the government prints money, the more money in circulation, the more prices go up. So things become more expensive and your money is worth less. There's been a few nations in history that were destroyed by hyperinflation because the government kept printing money, printing money, printing money. Zimbabwe was one. The Weimar Republic, which later becomes Germany under Hitler, was another one. There's actually pictures of that time period in the 1920s and early 1930s of Germany where they had wheelbarrows full of money to go buy like a loaf of bread, and they eventually started using it for toilet paper because it was so worthless because the government had to print out so much money to pay the bills that they owed to the other nations for starting World War One, and eventually they just stopped that, start building up their military, and boom, we have World War Two. So inflation is a terrible thing, and it can destroy nations completely and their currency. Okay, guys, keep working hard. Let me know if you need anything, and I'll be sending resources below. Okay, and again, if you take notes on this video and send them back to me, you'll get a little bit of extra credit. All right, so take advantage if you need to. Take care. Bye.